Today's video is brought to our friends at HelloFresh, who are giving you great tasting, healthy food options to stuff your face without ever having to leave your own home. Honestly, look, who's got time to cook a full meal from scratch anymore after a full day of work? Nobody wants to spend hours preparing a meal in the kitchen. Unfortunately, the other options can be tricky or just very expensive. One fun fact from a Zagat dining survey, HelloFresh is up to 72% cheaper than dining at a restaurant. So yes, HelloFresh is the perfect solution that checks every box. It's going to help you try something that's fresh and adventurous, it's affordable, convenient, and environmentally conscious. And it's all from the comfort of your own home. Yes, with HelloFresh, you get a specially designed 5-star meal kit that's going to break you out of the recipe rut. They work with local farmers to offer you more than 30 dinner recipes to choose from every week, all of which are delicious, locally sourced meals that help you skip the meal prep and put dinner on the table quickly, as fast as 20 minutes if you're using one of their quick and easy 20-minute recipes. Right now, you still have the chance to grab some of their sweet, seasonal summer servings from their Taste of Summer series. So, they've got a cheese-stuffed burger with pesto aioli if you're craving a barbecue, or maybe you're more focused on fitness goals. In that case, request their cheesy spinach and mushroom stromboli. Both of those sound delicious. Right now, you guys can go to HelloFresh.com and use the code BRAINFOOD16 to get up to 16 free meals across 7 boxes, plus 3 surprise gifts. Excellent deal from our friends at HelloFresh, and now today's video. In the second episode of the acclaimed television series Breaking Bad, high school chemistry teacher turned drug kingpin Walter White and his accomplice Jesse Pinkman find themselves in a rather sticky situation. Having just killed 2 drug dealers who kidnapped and forced them to cook methamphetamine at gunpoint, the pair must now find a way to dispose of the bodies. Drawing on his extensive knowledge of chemistry, Walt comes up with a cunning plan: dissolve the bodies in hydrofluoric acid. While Walt steals the requisite chemicals from the school lab, he sends Jesse to find a suitably large container to dissolve the bodies in, specifying that the container must be made out of polyethylene plastic. Unfortunately, Walt fails to explain the reasoning for this choice, and after failing to find a large enough container, Jesse simply places one of the bodies in a regular bathtub, pours the acid over it, and calls it a day. Turns out that's a bit of a mistake, for hours later the ceiling suddenly collapses in a spray of acid and gory pink chunks of flesh, the acid having not only dissolved the body, but also the enameled metal bathtub and the floor beneath it. Whoops-a-doodle. While the show's creators have claimed that the chemistry in the show is as accurate as they could make it, they have also admitted to fudging the truth in places to prevent viewers from trying Walt and Jesse's chemical antics at home. So, just how realistic is the dynamic duo's plan for dissolving a body? Can hydrofluoric acid actually reduce 80 kilograms of flesh and bone to pink paste within hours? Alas, for all of you aspiring drug kingpins out there, the answer is no. Indeed, it is curious that an expert chemist like Walter White would choose hydrofluoric acid as his corporeal solvent, not only because this chemical is particularly ill-suited to the task of dissolving human flesh, but because it is so dangerous that Walt and Jesse were lucky not to have wound up dead themselves. Hydrofluoric acid, or HF, consists of a fluorine atom bonded to a hydrogen atom, and like all acids, it will dissociate into its component ions when diluted in water. Because fluorine is one of the most reactive elements on the periodic table, hydrofluoric acid readily etches glass and silicon and will dissolve most metals except for nickel, gold, platinum, or silver, and most plastic except for polyethylene, Teflon, natural rubber, and neoprene. So Walt was at least right on that front. Yet, despite this corrosiveness, hydrofluoric acid is not, strangely enough, considered a strong acid. This is because the formal definition of a strong acid is one which completely dissociates when diluted in water, releasing large amounts of hydrogen ions. Indeed, the term pH, used to denote the strength of acids and bases, stands for potential of hydrogen. Because fluorine is so reactive, it holds tightly onto its hydrogen ion and dissociates only partially in water, technically making it a weak acid. The upshot of this rather confusing chemical terminology is that when it comes to acid, strong does not necessarily mean corrosive, since the corrosiveness of an acid depends not on its hydrogen, but of the other negatively charged ion. Indeed, the strongest acids known to science, the carborane superacids, are millions of times stronger than concentrated sulfuric acid, but will not attack organic tissue. And it turns out, well, neither will hydrofluoric acid. In the 10th episode of the 11th season of the Discovery Channel series Mythbusters, hosts Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman teamed up with Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan to investigate some of the show's chemical claims, including the feasibility of dissolving a body in hydrofluoric acid. To test this myth, the Mythbusters placed the carcass of a pig in an enamel cast iron bathtub, poured hydrofluoric acid all over it, and waited, and waited. Disappointingly, even after several hours, the pig carcass remained completely intact with not a hint of the chunky pink goo from the television series, nor did the enamel tub show any signs of erosion. At first glance, this seems strange, given the extreme reactiveness and corrosiveness of fluorine. However, fluorine is so reactive that when dissolved in water, it tends to bond strongly with other elements, greatly reducing its corrosive power and making it all but useless for disposing of bodies. Indeed, hydrofluoric acid is far more dangerous to the living than to the dead. Readily absorbed through the skin or through the lungs as a vapor, hydrofluoric acid produces several chemical burns that are initially painless and do not become apparent until a day or so after exposure. But as nasty as that is, it gets much worse. For once inside the body, hydrofluoric acid becomes an insidious poison, aggressively leaching calcium out of the bones and other tissues. Unfortunately, calcium just happens to be used by the body to signal muscle cells, including those of the heart, to contract. Thus, had Walt and Jesse accidentally absorbed a large enough dose of the acid through their skin or lungs, they would have likely died of cardiac arrest several hours later, and the whole series would have been considerably shorter. So, if not hydrofluoric acid, what then could Walt and Jesse have used to carry out their nefarious deed? Surprisingly, some of the most effective chemicals for dissolving organic tissue are conveniently some of the easiest to obtain, such as sulfuric acid, commonly found in car batteries. Sulfuric acid, or H2SO4, is, unlike HF, both a strong and highly corrosive acid. A powerful hydrolyzing agent, it aggressively dehydrates organic compounds such as carbohydrates and proteins, stripping them of their hydrogen and oxygen and leaving carbon behind. In one classic classroom demonstration, concentrated sulfuric acid is added to a beaker of ordinary white sugar, unleashing a violently exothermic reaction that releases hot steam and sulfur oxides that leave behind a spongy black mass composed of nearly pure carbon. Sulfuric acid is also better at dissolving the calcium apatite in animal bones and other chemicals. For these reasons, sulfuric acid has long been a favorite tool of murderers looking to make their victims disappear without a trace. One infamous case was that of George Alexander Sauret, a French lawyer and con artist who in the 1920s carried out an elaborate insurance scheme with the help of two of his lovers, sisters Catherine and Philomene Schmidt. The scheme involved the sisters marrying unhealthy men on whom Sauret would take out large life insurance policies. A third accomplice, Louis Chambon de Verger, would pose as the husbands and undergo the requisite medical examination for the insurance policies to be approved. The husbands would then be killed with poison, their ill health preventing a criminal investigation, and the spoils divided up among the conspirators. While the scheme worked, in 1925, Sauret decided that Chambon de Verger was getting too greedy and murdered both him and his mistress, Noémie Ballandreau, dissolving their bodies in a vat of sulfuric acid to eliminate the evidence. The crime went unsolved for nearly 6 years, until 1931, when Catherine Schmidt was arrested for committing another insurance fraud and confessed to a previous crime. Sauret was arrested, tried, convicted for murder, and sentenced to death, being executed by guillotine on April 10, 1934. And for more on the sordid history of this infamous execution device, please check out our video, The Last Guillotine Execution in 1977, which is on our sister channel Highlight History. Though Sauret was eventually caught and executed, the effectiveness of his chemical disappearing act would inspire another criminal across the English Channel. Born in 1909 in Stamford, Lincolnshire, John Hay began his criminal career in the mid-1930s by posing as a solicitor and selling fraudulent stock shares, purportedly from former deceased clients at below market rates. However, due to a spelling error on his letterhead, he was soon caught and sentenced to 4 years in prison for fraud. Upon his release, Hay vowed to never again leave a victim alive to accuse him. In 1940, Hay ran into a former employer, William McSwan, in a pub, and he was introduced to McSwan's parents, Donald and Amy. William collected rent from several properties owned by his parents, and Hay soon grew envious of his wealth and lifestyle. So, on September 6, 1944, Hay lured William McSwan into a basement, hit him over the head with a lead pipe, and, inspired by the case of George Alexander Sauret, dumped his body in a 45-gallon oil drum of concentrated sulfuric acid. The body took 2 days to dissolve, whereupon Hay poured what remained down a manhole. Hay then went to McSwan's parents and informed them that William was hiding out in Scotland in order to avoid military service. Over the following year, Hay took over the rent collection from William McSwan, but when the war ended, his parents began to wonder why their son had not returned. So, well, Hay decided to kill them as well. And so on July the 2nd, 1945, Hay lured Donald and Amy McSwan into a basement, clubbed them over the head, and dissolved their bodies in acid. He then stole their pension checks and sold their rental properties for £8,000 and moved into the Onslow Court Hotel in Kensington. While Hay should have been set for life, he was also an inveterate gambler and soon found himself back in dire financial straits. So in 1947, he befriended the couple Archibald and Rose Henderson, and on February the 12th, lured them into a rented workshop, shot them dead, and I hope you're beginning to see the pattern here. He dissolved their bodies in sulfuric acid. He then forged a will with their signatures and sold their possessions for another £8,000. Hay's last victim was Olive Durant Deacon, the 69-year-old widow of a wealthy solicitor, John Durant Deacon, whom Hay befriended on the pretense of being an engineer interested in Olive's idea for artificial fingernails. On February the 18th, 1949, the same macabre dance repeated itself as Hay lured Durant Deacon to his workshop, shot her dead, and then dissolved her body in acid. This time, however, Hay would fall victim to his own haste, and his check had passed. 2 days after the murder, one of Durant Deacon's friends reported her missing. The police soon discovered Hay's long history of fraud and theft and searched the workshop, where they discovered a pile of incriminating evidence, including a dry cleaning receipt for Durant Deacon's Persian wool coat, which Hay had removed before dissolving her body. Even worse, unlike previous workshops Hay had rented for one of his nefarious deeds, the one used to kill and dissolve Olive Durant Deacon had no floor drain, so Hay simply dumped her liquefied remains over a rubble pile behind the property. An examination of the pile revealed 28 pounds of human body fat, part of a human foot, gallstones, and part of a denture that was eventually identified as belonging to Olive Durant Deacon. Hay, dubbed by the press as the Acid Bath murderer, was arrested, tried, and convicted of murder, meeting his fate at the end of a hangman's rope on August 10, 1949. In more recent years, the Sicilian mafia has become infamous for its Lupara Bianca, or white shotgun murders, in which victims mysteriously disappear without a trace. According to former hitman Filippo Marchesi, who worked under mafia boss Vincenzo Ciacane until his death in 1982, this is accomplished using concentrated sulfuric acid, which he claimed could completely liquefy a corpse in as little as 15 minutes. However, given the two previous examples that we've covered, this claim seems rather dubious, and in 2011, a group led by researcher Massimo Grillo at the University of Palermo set out to test the former mafioso's claims. Using pigs as an analog for humans, the team placed various cuts of tissue and bone in different concentrations of sulfuric acid and timed how long it took for them to dissolve. Unsurprisingly, this took far longer than Marchesi had claimed, on the order of 2 days with concentrated acid. By diluting the acid in water, the researchers were able to cut this time down to 12 hours for muscle and cartilage, but it still took 2 days for the bone to dissolve, and even then the process left behind large, fragile bone fragments with the consistency of shortbread, which still had to be pulverized by hand. Another team at the University of Milan obtained similar results, which led researcher Cristina Cataneo to conclude it is conceivable that a possible attempt to destroy an entire body is a thoroughly different task from destroying small samples. For a more effective means of destroying evidence, you're far better off moving to the other end of the pH scale and using a strong alkali, specifically sodium or potassium hydroxide, better known as lye. Lye is a powerful hydrolyzing agent with the added benefit that it is more effective than acids at breaking down the protein keratin that makes up hair and fingernails. Indeed, this is why it's commonly sold for clearing clogged drains. Furthermore, it is much easier to obtain lye in large quantities without arousing suspicion, for example, for making handmade soap, whereas strong acids are more heavily regulated since they can be used to manufacture explosives. Indeed, immersion in lye is the preferred body disposal method for the Mexican drug cartels, who rather darkly refer to the process as making pozole, a traditional Mexican meat stew, while highway departments, hospitals, and universities use lye-based digesters to dispose of roadkill, laboratory animals, human cadavers donated for medical research, and other biological waste. Heated to 100 degrees Celsius, the boiling point of water, a concentrated lye solution can dissolve a body in as little as 2 hours. Pressurizing the digester vessel allows the temperature to be raised even higher, further accelerating the process. In the end, all that remains is a light brown liquid composed mainly of water and amino acids, and a handful of crumbling bone fragments, both of which can be safely flushed down a regular drain. The efficiency of this process has led to its emergence as a green alternative to cremation for disposing of human corpses. Also known as aquamation, the process consumes only 1/8 of the energy and emits 1/10 the greenhouse gases as traditional cremation, with the added bonus of not emitting toxic heavy metals such as mercury from dental fillings into the environment. The bone fragments that remain can be pulverized in a machine called a cremulator, producing a fine white powder that can be placed in an urn, buried, or scattered in place of traditional ashes. First patented in 1888, aquamation was not offered commercially until the 1980s, and then only for disposing of pets. Only recently has it begun to gain traction with the human funeral industry, with Minnesota being the first US state to legalize the process in 2003. 10 more states soon followed, the most recent being California in 2020. However, the funeral industry is very resistant to change, and 11 states have passed legislation banning aquamation outright. It remains to be seen whether the process will ever catch on or supplant burial and cremation as the dominant method of body disposal in the US. But while dissolution in lye is by far the easiest and most effective way of disposing of a body, it isn't that interesting to look at. But thankfully for murderers and mafiosos with a taste for the dramatic, there is a more exciting option: the piranha solution. Mainly used in analytical laboratories for cleaning traces of organic materials off glassware or silicon wafers, piranha solution is composed of concentrated hydrogen peroxide, or H2O2, mixed with sulfuric acid. As covered in our previous video, the German rocket fighter that dissolved its pilots alive, concentrated hydrogen peroxide, also known as high-test peroxide, or HTP, is so reactive and corrosive it can strip flesh from bone in seconds. Mixing it with sulfuric acid combines the oxidation of the former with the hydrolyzation of the latter, producing a powerful 1-2 chemical punch. So effective is piranha solution at dissolving organic tissue that a piece of meat and bone lowered into it will disappear almost as soon as it hits the surface. This deadly efficiency was dramatically illustrated by the Mythbusters, who followed up their hydrofluoric acid test by immersing another pig carcass in piranha solution. This time the solution reacted immediately and violently, producing copious quantities of heat and steam and reducing the pig to a dark green oily soup within minutes. But while quick, efficient, and dramatic, piranha solution suffers from the same problem as sulfuric and other strong acids. The sale of ingredients is tightly regulated, creating a highly incriminating paper trail. Indeed, even in cases where a criminal managed to successfully make a body disappear, this paper trail is often enough to crack the investigation wide open. Take the case of American chemist Larissa Schuster, who in 2003, along with her lab assistant James Fagone, murdered her ex-husband Tim Schuster and dissolved his body in a barrel of hydrochloric acid. Police investigators quickly uncovered receipts for the purchase of the acid and the rental of a storage unit, a search which turned up a barrel containing Tim Schuster's remains. In 2008, Larissa Schuster was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. In conclusion, for all its chemical verisimilitude, Breaking Bad was dead wrong about dissolving bodies. Not only is hydrofluoric acid possibly the worst choice for the job, but even the most corrosive chemicals like sulfuric acid and sodium hydroxide can take hours or even days to get the job done. And even then, they often leave readily identifiable fragments and an incriminating paper trail of suspicious purchasers. So, if you ever find yourself looking for the best way to dispose of a body, take a moment to reflect on how you got to this place, because chances are you've got much bigger problems to deal with.